And on this Thursday show, I think we're really kind of starting to come down the home stretch on the college football coaching carousel, something that we frankly talked about since really early to mid-September when Scott Frost got fired at Nebraska. And so it's interesting, right? Because this coaching carousel stuff, it's like this never-ending, ever-evolving thing in college football. And we talk about it, 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 and then it just pretty much comes to an end, right? It, like in the snap of a finger. And this is the week that it happens for all the reasons that we told you. But if you go back and look at the last couple of days in college football, most of the head coaching jobs are filled, right? Saturday, Nebraska hires Matt Rule. Sunday, Arizona State hires Kenny Dillingham. Wisconsin hires Luke Fickell. Monday, we get Hugh Freeze at Auburn. Tuesday, we get Georgia Tech promoting their interim. And oh, by the way, how about Trent Dilfer going to UAB? That one was a plot twist I was not expecting. But I bring it up because most everything is done on the coaching carousel, except for one big thing, except for one big job at the Power 5 level, and that is Colorado. And what makes Colorado especially interesting is that we very publicly know that they have offered the job to one person. It is one Deion Sanders. You may know him as Coach Prime, currently at Jackson State. Previously, I don't know, maybe the greatest cornerback in the history of the NFL and a really good baseball player to boot. And so why it's interesting is this Deion Colorado kind of thing. I think at first everybody wasn't really sure what to make of it. But as we get deeper into the week, as Colorado has not filled its job, and as more stuff comes out about Deion, this is getting increasingly interesting in a world where every other major job has been filled. And so we got some new information on Wednesday. I want to break it all down. I want to discuss. I want to get you guys and girls all the details because this is maybe the most fascinating coaching carousel story that we've had in a season where we have had a ton of them. And so basically, let's kind of just start with what we know about the Deion Sanders situation as it pertains to Power 5 football or even, FBS football, right? So Deion Sanders, as I said, I think we all know, great NFL player. In the last couple of years, he's been at Jackson State and he's been absolutely killing it. And I think the question that we've talked about on this show time and time and time again, does Deion want to continue to build up that HBCU and really elevate HBCU football as a whole? Or does he want to go to the next level, go to the Power 5 level and compete against the best of the best? Well, as I said on Monday's show, if you look around, there really are no jobs that are really open to speak of except for Colorado. And what's interesting about it is that we know that Colorado has offered Deion Sanders its head coaching job. How do we know? Well, on Saturday, Bruce Feldman reported it. And on Monday, Deion Sanders confirmed Bruce Feldman's report. He said, yeah, it's true. They're not the only ones. Right now, my focus is at Jackson State, and that is my only priority right now. So what we know about Deion Sanders is that at the very least, he did get at least one Power 5 offer this offseason, and it appears to still be on the table because as I record here on Wednesday night into Thursday, Colorado has not named a head coach. What was interesting, though, was that on Wednesday, we got a whole bunch of new information about where Deion could or could not be headed. Remember, he said in an interview, yeah, I got an offer from Colorado, and they're not the only one. Well, on Wednesday, we got reports, first of all, that South Florida, which is a very interesting job, appears to have real interest in Deion Sanders. Now, some of you would sit there and say, South Florida, it's a group of 5, it's in the AAC. Why would Deion Sanders ever consider it? And I'll be honest, if I was Deion Sanders, I don't know if I would. But what I would say is it's probably one of the better group of 5 jobs. Remember, group of 5 is, of course, the level below the Power 5. So the Power 5 is the ACC, the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12, and the Pac-12. The group of 5 is all of the other teams playing FBS football. But you could argue that South Florida is maybe the best job or one of the best jobs in the group of 5 right now. It's located in Tampa, Florida. It's a major state university. They play right now in an NFL arena or NFL stadium, although my understanding is that they actually are trying to get a new on-campus stadium because it's tough to fill Raymond James Stadium. But this is a program that about 15 years ago was really operating at a really high level. They were at one point incredibly top 10 in the country. It's obviously a great place to recruit. And I do think in the transfer portal era, they're going to have a ton of success, right? Because there's a ton of guys from the state of Florida that go to the SEC, the ACC, Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, Florida, Florida State, Miami, it doesn't work out. And when they're looking to transfer, go someplace, a place like South Florida makes sense. So this is really one of the premier group of 5 jobs. Like Colorado, it has not been filled. And if Deion is looking to get to just the FBS level, this spot makes sense. Remember, for people who do not know, he is from the state of Florida. He is from Fort Myers, which is about an hour and a half to 2 hours from Tampa. So kind of close to home. He knows the area, great recruiting base. And I keep saying it, but I think it's important to note, we are headed toward a world with a 12-team college football playoff. And so as crazy as it sounds, and I know some fans are going to get mad at me for saying this, but you look at a job like South Florida, remember, in the 12-team playoff future that we have, the top 6 conferences are going to get an automatic bid to the college football playoff. Why that's important is because just think about it. If you're at a place like South Florida, you can win at a really high level and get to the playoff. It's going to be easier probably to get to the playoff from a place like South Florida than, again, a place like, I don't know, Minnesota or Illinois, or like a second or third tier Big Ten school that's got to go through Ohio State and Michigan every year, a second or third tier SEC school that's got to go through LSU and Georgia and Alabama every year. And so it makes sense if that is what Deion wants, if he wants to elevate to the next level. It's near home. It makes sense. I totally get it, even if it's not, I'm not sure it's something that I would do. What was also interesting on Wednesday, though, and this was a plot twist that I was not expecting at all. Like somehow out of nowhere, we got a report that Cincinnati is actually interested in Deion Sanders. Cincinnati, of course, Luke Fickell was their head coach. They made the college football playoff last year in the 4-team era. Luke Fickell goes to Wisconsin. He decides to move on. Cincinnati's looking for a new head coach. We didn't really talk about that job, but there's some very interesting candidates, including, by the way, one Urban Meyer, whose son, I believe, is a grad assistant there. Urban Meyer went to Cincinnati. So there's some interesting candidates, but Cincinnati appears to at least have some sort of interest in Deion Sanders. And so we really have 3 schools that have been linked to Deion Sanders: Colorado, South Florida, and Cincinnati. And then on top of everything else, as if this stuff isn't crazy enough, we got the dueling report/denial from Deion throughout the day on Wednesday. So what am I talking about? Well, it was probably about, 1 p.m. Eastern or so. I saw this tweet come out. It's from a guy named Kevin O'Donnell, who covers South Florida for Fox 13 in Florida, okay? Now, I would say it hasn't been a banner couple weeks for the local TV reporters trying to break college football news. Remember, there was the guy in Mississippi that claimed that Lane Kiffin was resigning the day after the Egg Bowl. So I'm not saying that Kevin O'Donnell from Fox 13 in Florida is Bruce Feldman or Ross Dellinger or Pete Thamel. But at the same time, he put out a report at, again, I guess it was a little earlier than I thought. I guess it was about 8:30 Eastern time, where he said Deion Sanders has been telling recruits he will be at a school on Sunday. The decision appears to be down to the 3 schools that I just mentioned: Colorado, Cincinnati, and South Florida. So that was the report. And then, of course, a few hours later, somebody else put out a report saying that they talked to Deion Sanders, and he completely denied it. And so what's fact, what's fiction? That gets you caught up on what happened. The question is what's fact and what's fiction. And what I would say is this: a couple things stand out. First of all, in terms of this report, Deion Sanders has been telling recruits he will be at a school on Sunday. I actually believe that more than the Deion Sanders denial, right? And let me explain why. One, when coaching changes happen, you know who the first people to know are? It's actually the recruits. It's not your current players. It's not the bosses. It's not the media. It's the recruits. Because when you go somewhere, you're trying to get players to come with you. And so I believe that Deion Sanders is saying, hey, I have something in the works. You're going to find out soon. And I believe he's telling recruits. I'll give you a quick side story and we'll get back to Deion. But if you remember, so Rich Rodriguez, when he went to Michigan, it was actually a recruiting reporter that broke the story that Rich Rodriguez was leaving West Virginia for Michigan. Why? Because Terrell Pryor was being recruited by Rich Rodriguez at West Virginia. Terrell Pryor was the number 1 player in America. And the first phone call Rich Rodriguez made when he took the Michigan job was to Terrell Pryor. And so that's a side story. But I believe this Kevin O'Donnell guy that says, look, I've been talking to recruits and Deion says he's going to make some sort of decision by Sunday. Now, keep in mind, a decision doesn't necessarily mean he's leaving. but it feels as though he is at least considering those 3 schools. And I truly believe that he is considering leaving Jackson State. I'll be honest, no inside information, haven't talked to any recruits, but there are really a couple reasons why I believe that Deion Sanders is seriously considering these jobs. And keep in mind, the timeline of Saturday makes sense because Jackson State, and I probably should have mentioned this earlier, they still have one more game this weekend, right? And so it'd be one thing if the season was over, that'd be weird, but this is almost like a coach coaching in a conference championship game that is being pursued by other schools. You kind of wonder, is he really just coaching or is there other stuff going on behind the scenes? So in terms of why I believe that Deion Sanders could very much be in the mix for these jobs, it's a couple reasons. First off, the normal reason that coaches kind of put their name out there and kind of deny, but don't really deny, that doesn't really apply to Deion Sanders, right? Most of the time, when a coach's name is out there with speculation in terms of are they going to leave for another job or not, usually the reason that it's out there is pretty straightforward. They're trying to leverage their school for more money. Think about Lane Kiffin, right? Lane Kiffin's name was out there for Auburn for weeks, and he never really denied it. And the reason he never denied it is because of the fact that he was trying to leverage Auburn to get the most money from Ole Miss possible. Well, with Deion Sanders, that doesn't really apply for a couple reasons. One, and I hate to be crass, we all know Jackson State doesn't have money, okay? He's not trying to leverage more money out of Jackson State. As a matter of fact, it's actually the exact opposite. If you do any homework, if you know anything about Deion has actually given back some of his salary to help Jackson State in other areas. So in other words, his salary, I believe, is about $300,000. He's given it back so the team can get a new locker room, can get some new turf on the field. So he's clearly not using these media reports to leverage Jackson State. And two, if you remember, dating back to the 60 Minutes report, which we discussed probably about six or so weeks ago, if you remember back then, think about that. What was the reason that Deion Sanders said that he would consider other schools? He said he'd consider other schools because it wasn't for him. It was because his assistant coaches were making nothing. And he said, it's not fair of me to ask them to pour blood, sweat, and tears into this program and not pay them what they're worth. So we already know that he's listening. He hasn't really denied anything other than that some sort of decision will be made on Saturday. He's admitted that he has had job offers. And here's the last part that makes me think that he's really considering something, including Colorado. Why I think Colorado is on the table, besides everything we talked about Monday, about the fact that, you know, it's a Power 5 job, chance to compete at a high level, all that stuff. Here's why I think he's considering it. It's because of what I said to lead the segment. All of the other Power 5 jobs are filled. At this time of year, if you're a Power 5 school, you do not want to wait to fill your job. Nebraska sprinted to the finish line to get Matt Rule in place. Auburn sprinted to the finish line to get Hugh Freeze in place. They probably would have announced it Sunday if it wasn't for the mini fan revolt. ASU, Kenny Dillingham is calling plays for Oregon on Saturday afternoon, immediately flies to Arizona to take the Arizona State job. And so all of these schools, every single one that has an opening is sprinting to get their head coach in place. Yet Colorado, it's now Thursday, and they're just milling around, hanging out, saying, whatever, we'll hire a coach whenever. Beyond that, and I think this is important, like Colorado has some real candidates that they could probably get. Brian Harsin at Auburn, I think would make a lot of sense at Colorado. Tom Herman is clearly out there trying to figure out his next head coaching job. He wants to coach. He coached at Texas. He's recruited that area. It would make sense to go after Tom Herman. I would argue, and this might be a stretch, I would argue it makes sense to go after Dan Mullen. Dan Mullen, you remember, before he went to the SEC, he coached with Urban Meyer at Utah. I think Dan Mullen kind of makes sense there. By the way, there's a guy named Ryan Walters, who's the Illinois defensive coordinator. Illinois, remember, finished 8-4 in the regular season. He's a Colorado alum, and he's out there. And so let me ask you a simple question. Why would they be waiting? Why would they be hanging out if they didn't feel pretty good that they had an opportunity to get Deion Sanders? It doesn't make sense to me when there are candidates available. Matter of fact, I'll kind of wrap on this. You know what it actually reminds me of? I do these weird cross-sport comparisons sometimes, but I was thinking about this today, and I'm probably the only one that remembers this because I'm a sicko that covers this stuff 365 days a year. But Chris Beard, the Texas basketball coach, remember, he was at Texas Tech before he went to Texas. And if you remember 2 springs ago when he got hired at Texas, Texas, they lose early in the NCAA tournament. Shaka Smart leaves to take the Marquette job. And if you remember, and you probably don't, only I do, Chris Beard at Texas Tech, his buyout dropped on April 1st. And so there was like a week where Shaka Smart leaves Texas, and there's really just no real buzz as to who's going to fill the Texas coaching job. All these other jobs are getting filled left and right? That was the year Indiana was open and all these other schools are open. And yet for some reason, Texas is just waiting. They're waiting. And then April 1st, when Chris Beard's buyout dropped, boom, like a hammer, Chris Beard leaves for Texas. And so that's kind of what I feel like with Colorado. Why are they waiting? Why are they sitting around? Why are they just hanging out if Deion isn't their guy? Now, does that mean Deion's definitively going to say yes? I don't know. It's up to Deion. But it doesn't make sense otherwise. And so that leads me to believe that there's something to it. Again, we know Deion has a job offer from Colorado. We know he has 1 game left in his season. He's obviously not going to leave before that. And we know that Colorado appears to be taking their sweet time. Something doesn't add up. I'm just telling you. I wouldn't say with 100% certainty that Deion's going to be the next head coach of Colorado. What I feel pretty confident saying is I think he's seriously considering it, because if he wasn't, he would have put something out by now. Colorado would have moved on to somebody else. It appears as though he is waiting it out.